Hi everybody. This video is exactly what it's labeled as. This is just sort of a basic troubleshooting video. I want to highlight a few things that I've noticed over the years students get hung up on when trying to learn R and RStudio. This is absolutely just a supplement, probably a fairly weak supplement to the excellent cookbook textbooks that we'll be using in class and the online resources that I'll point you to in class or that you'll find through simple Google searches. But anyway, here's a few things that you might run into, just in case you aren't keeping up with the readings. So here I've opened RStudio on my computer. If you just open it straight from whatever software manager you use, you'll see on the right side, because we've already set it up, our R console, and on the left side, kind of nothing. So the first thing I'm going to do is open up an R script that I made using the file, open file window. I've got this in my downloads. I've got this troubleshooting examples file that I'm opening, and in this case it's just a blank file that I made just for this. I'm going to minimize this bottom window because I don't need it. Okay, so I have my script file ready to save my code as I work through my project, and then the R console is set up and ready for processing. Okay, so the first thing I need to do, because what we're doing is all data-based, I need to load my data. Let's say I know from my class notes that I'm going to be using a function called read Excel because I'm loading an Excel file. So I type in read Excel just like usual. I navigate into the downloads folder or wherever that data happens to live using the tab, and I run it, and I get this error in read Excel, could not find function. You're going to run into this, especially early on. We use a lot of, actually one of the things that makes R such a useful software is that there are statisticians and researchers and scientists all over the world building things on top of R. Read Excel is one example of that. I know that I can't use read Excel until I have loaded the package that it's based on. So if you run into a could not find function, remember, it will only let you use the functions that are loaded in base R, or the sort of normal packages. Anything you are adding on top, you have to actually load the library. Let's say in this case I can't remember how read Excel works. There is a really handy thing, these built-in help menus. If I use a question mark in front of read Excel and run it, it will take me to a fairly extensive help file. I use these all the time. These are super useful, and in fact in RStudio you can search directly through the search bar if you don't want to use the question mark method. Okay, so that's super handy. Now let's say I want to load a piece of data that I know is called Hicks McKee Smith. This is another one that students get hung up on a lot. So I'm going to go ahead and run this, and it tells me path does not exist. Remember, when you open RStudio, it puts you somewhere in your hard drive or in the cloud version of RStudio on a particular project workspace. It does not have access to every file on your hard drive. You have to tell it where the files live. So in this case, I know, actually I know because I showed you before, it lives in the downloads folder. But you're gonna run into this a lot. You're gonna be working in a lot of different folders on your hard drive. You're gonna try and run things, and you're gonna get path does not exist. There is a function called get working directory, get WD. This will tell you where you are in your hard drive, and so clearly if that's not where your data lives, that's why you're getting the path does not exist. You can also use that to set a working directory, but it's really not super useful to do that manually. So in this case, actually what we're going to do is use the tab autocomplete in RStudio. So I just do the first quote in read Excel and I hit tab, and now this is all the folders on my hard drive, at least starting from where I am in the hard drive, and I can see here I'm in my home folder. So I go to my downloads, I hit tab again, and there's the data. Tab again to autocomplete. Close the quote, close the parenthesis. I'm going to make sure to save this as an object. I'm going to call it D, and I read in the data. So now, just by looking at D, there's my data. Super handy. So we've covered make sure to load your packages using library, the help using the question mark or the search directly in the help section, and then knowing that your data or your R script file might live in a different folder from where R opened, and so making sure to direct it there. You can also import data using RStudio. This will take you to a GUI window. I actually have never used this function because I like to write my code by hand so I can see what I did rather than have steps that aren't recorded, though this will give you apparently the code preview, which is kind of cool. Feel free to go this route if you so choose. Okay, so we know what to do if we have missing functions. We search for the package that it comes from. We know that if data won't load, we want to check the working directory or input the data from the RStudio menu. The next thing that's going to come up a lot is code just isn't doing what you think it should do. And actually, I'm going to make sure to annotate my code because this is always a good idea so that when you go back, you'll always remember what that code did. Or in this case, I can use the view function and it's going to tell me, ooh, look at that handy spreadsheet. Okay, so I have my annotated code. Next thing I want to do is, let's say we're going to make something and the code just isn't doing what you think it's going to do. So let's say the first thing I want to do is look at, this is a state data I think you'll be looking at in week 3 or 4 of class. Let's say I just want to look at Missouri data. There are 4,600 rows of data in this data set. So the first thing I'm going to do, and don't worry about these commands if we haven't covered them in class yet, we will get to these. What I want you to see are some of the hangups. Okay, so I tried to filter to only look at the rows in the data set that are Missouri, and it told me I'm missing the function. So I need to load a library. Clearly I have missed a package here. I go back to my notes from class and I see that all of those, or from the book, come from the tidyverse package. So I load the tidyverse, and now filter works. I'm looking at only 389 rows from that original 4,600. So once again, when you get those errors, go back to it, here you go. Could not find function. You forgot to load a library. So that's handy. Let's say you start writing some code. I'm going to filter a thing and you kind of have a brain fart. And so you stop that code, right? You start working with a classmate. And you jump down a ways. Let's go down here. And you start writing new code. Yeah, no, let's do this. And then, now let's just look at it. Okay, yeah, that's working. So let's say we're going to make a picture now. X equals state. We're just going to make a bar plot real quick. Bar. Good, that worked. Okay, so now I want to go back to my filter. I want to look at that bar one more time. So I run that, and you get this. This happens a lot to everybody. We left a hanging pipe. This, as we'll talk about in class, is known as the pipe. It sends data to the next function. When you leave one hanging and you just go on to write code that you know works, and suddenly that code won't work, it's because RStudio is looking above and thinking these two things must be related because you left an open pipe. So anytime code you know works stops working, go back up a ways and see if you've left something hanging and open. And one way to know is if I were to hit enter anywhere here, it's going to keep, see that indent? It thinks, or it's reminding me that there is something happening above that is incomplete. Once I go back here and delete this, my bar plot runs again. So anytime your data won't load, make sure to look for, anytime code isn't working like you think it should, look for a pipe to nowhere. Look to see if that's not working. Another thing that might happen is you run code, and if you look in the R console here, you see it's got the normal is that greater than symbol. That tells you it's ready for a new command. If you see a plus, that's its way of saying you're in the middle of a function and you forgot to complete it. And in fact, we can see why, right? I added a plus at the end of this line, which says, okay, I'm going to send something else into this function, and I didn't. But let's say you've sent a lot of code, and you just can't figure out why you can't get out of the plus. Use the escape key on your keyboard. Escape just sort of interrupts the function that you were writing and puts you back at a clean spot. So escape, super handy. Another thing you might run into when your code won't run is you accidentally delete a quotation mark somewhere, and you start writing and you notice, oh, that's weird, why is everything in green? Green definitely, and in fact, look, I hit enter after the pipe and it just went to the next line. It's not indented. It doesn't recognize that I'm doing a new thing. It's because it believes I am still writing the condition for my filter command. So anytime you see a lot of green and functions aren't wrapping, look up, see if you can find, and actually RStudio does a nice job of showing where it thinks there's errors. Look up and see if you have a quotation mark that you didn't complete. In addition, let's say you finish your quotation mark, but you forget the closing parenthesis. Every function in R will have an open and a close parenthesis. In that case, every time I hit enter, it's once again telling me you're not done with this command. RStudio tells me where it thinks the problem starts, and if I were to run that, nothing would happen. Once again, I've got that plus over here that tells me it's incomplete, so I hit escape to get rid of that. Or if I tried to write, let's say I manually go back over here and I try to write a new thing, even just to look at D, you're going to see a lot of that because I wasn't paying attention. I was actually in a function when I tried to do a new thing and I got an error. So remember, you got to close your parentheses, you got to close or complete your quotation marks. Those come up a lot, especially when you're writing fast. The next thing I would say to you is get in the habit of saving your script file all the time. Save the work that you're doing. In fact, I just did it so quickly because it's force of habit, but anytime you write, you'll see the name of your script file turns red and an asterisk gets added. That's its way of saying this is unsaved work. Control S or File Save. It's not highlightable here because I just saved it. Just get in that habit. Do it all the time. You make a picture you like or you make a picture you want to come back and work on, save your script file. Let's see, the last things I want to show is what happens when everything goes wrong. and this just happens sometimes. You run a big chunk of code and R is just processing. I won't build in a fake example, but I could put in a loop here over 10 million rows and make it hang. The first thing you can do is in the session menu, there's a restart R. For me, it's Control-Shift F10. I'm not sure that's universal across operating systems. If you restart R, it actually forces it to clear the console. It starts from scratch. So anything I've loaded before is now gone. So if I were to type in D, it doesn't know what D is because I haven't loaded the read Excel package or input the data. Just because it's in my script file, R has started clean. This is a really useful habit to get into, even when things aren't going wrong. You'll find that you'll work on a number of different scripts, or you'll borrow code from earlier projects. Things can get a little cross purposes. You might accidentally be working from data that you had loaded in a different script, in the current script you're working in. Just get in the habit every once in a while of wiping R and starting from scratch to make sure the code is doing what you think it's doing. If that doesn't work and R is not responding or none of it is responding, turn it off and on again. Close your RStudio, reopen your RStudio, and start again. This will reward you if you have been saving constantly because you'll lose nothing. That's the nice thing about R versus GUI-based analysis tools like Excel, where you have to remember the things you clicked on and which ribbon hides a thing. All the work we do lives right here. And as long as you save it, you'll never lose it. So there you go. I'm sure you guys will find other ways for R to fail you, and I will be happy to help you get through those. Let me know if there are things we should add to this video going forward, and we will keep expanding it. Good luck. You're going to be fine, and I'll see you in class.